Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip over there. So for this one, we are returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. These guys have a very, very good reputation, and I certainly enjoyed the last beer that I had from them. And I have to say, this is one that I'm very, very curious about. And if you've watched the channel before, you'll know that this particular style of beer is quite quirky, and it's also right up my street. So fingers crossed this is another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. And if you do get the chance to try some Estonian beers, I highly recommend that you do. There's some great stuff over there, and it's a wonderful country as well. Do go and visit it if you get the chance. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Saue, which is close to Tallinn, the capital city in the northwest of the country, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Pruulikoda Õllenaut. So this particular beer is called the Imperial Turbahunt. It comes in at 15% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial Peat Ale. So yeah, I think this one will be a little bit of a monster. A nice Scotch malt smoked beer, this one. Very, very curious about this one. I saw this, I just had to get it, you know. If you watch the channel for any length of time, you'll know that my whole love of craft beer began with the Bamberg Rauch beers, and I've always been a fan of a peated whiskey. So when I saw this one, I just had to pick it up. So yeah, this beer was either bought at Coat in Tallinn or at Gambrinus in Tartu. I actually can't remember which shop I got this one in. But yeah, this one just had to be bought. I can't remember exactly how much I paid for it though, but I do actually have another beer that is a Scottish peated malted one that I brought back from Estonia as well, and you'll see that in a few videos time. But yeah, at 15%, this one is an absolute monster. But yeah, the last beer that I had from Õllenaut was the Impi, which was an old school Imperial Stout, and I thought that was very, very nice actually, so I'm curious to see how this one comes off as well. But yeah, very, very much looking forward to trying this one, and as I said, hopefully this makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. I'm certainly quite excited for this one. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Pruulikoda Õllenaut before, and I'm hoping that we can get some more beers from these guys in the future to review on the channel. I'm sure I'll go back to Estonia at some point fairly soon, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I still have a few beers to work my way through, but we are getting down to the end of what I brought back from Estonia last time, but I'm sure there will be more. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Õllenaut then. So Õllenaut, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Saue, which is close to Tallinn, to the southwest of the city, and these guys released their first beers back in 2013, and the two men behind the brewery are Ilmar Reini and Urmas Roots. So Ilmar Reini was a chef who became a home brewer, and he would brew in his garden shed because he just couldn't find the beers that he wanted in Estonia. But he started brewing back in about 2009 using a small 55-litre kettle, but he soon found that he really enjoyed it, and he decided that he wanted to kind of pursue this as his professional career. So at this point he drew up a business plan to create a brewery, and he was joined by Urmas Roots, who came from a background in economics and finance. So together they secured a bank loan and bought a brew kit from the UK. And as I mentioned to you, the brewery is based in Saue, which is to the southwest of Tallinn itself, in Harjumaa county in the northwest of Estonia. But the first bottles were produced in 2013, and they were on the shelves in the winter of that year. But over the years they continued to expand the brewery and build up their exports, and at maximum they were able to produce around 150,000 litres of beer per year with their original equipment. But they focused on including some local ingredients in their beers, such as birch, and different berries and things like that, so you can find some very, very interesting beers from Õllenaut, and they're still experimenting like that as well. But in the summer of 2019, they launched a crowdfunding exercise to fund new infrastructure for the brewery, namely a 10 hectolitre brew kit, which was acquired from Zip Brewing in Hungary, who supply quite a few places across Europe actually, but they bought this brew kit and also some different filling lines as well, and in total they managed to raise about €320,000, and the total investment in the new brewery equipment was around €1.3 million. But since this investment they've been producing many more different styles of beer, and they've also started producing kvass and alcohol-free beer as well, which is quite interesting. And as of July 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 85 different kinds of beer. So a fairly prolific brewery, doing lots of different styles like I say, and I've been impressed with the ones that I've had from them so far. I think the next review that I do from these guys has to be like a lager, or perhaps, you know, an IPA or something like that, because, you know, this will be the second kind of malty leaning beer that I've had from them. But yeah, a very well respected brewery, and as is the case with quite a few of the breweries in Estonia, they're fairly easy to find across Europe actually, because, you know, Estonia is a small country of only about like 1.3 million people. So a big chunk of the production that these breweries do is exported. Usually about, you know, I think it's about 2/3 of it or something tends to be exported, and about 30% of it stays for the local market. So that's one of the really cool things about the Baltic countries. Small populations, but their breweries export quite a lot. And as I say, the quality of beer in Estonia is great, and these guys, along with the likes of Puasta, Pojala, and I guess Tanker as well, these guys are, and Sori perhaps, these are probably the kind of 5 sort of pioneering breweries, I guess you could say, in Estonia. There are others, of course. I think there's about 50 or 60 breweries in Estonia these days. But yeah, that's it for your history section of this video. That's all I can really tell you about Pruulikoda Õllenaut. So yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a look at this beer itself then. I'm very curious about this. So like I said to you, this one is the Imperial Turbahunt. Turbahunt, I'm sure it translates to something like hunter. I'm sure they said it was some kind of hunter, or you know, forest hunter, I think it was. That's what they said this one translated to, but there's also an original version of this which came in at 11.2%, and that one was simply called Turbahunt, but this one is the Imperial Turbahunt, 15% ABV. So yeah, it's a little bit of a monster. I'm not sure exactly how much I would have paid for this one. I think maybe about €8 or something like that. That would seem reasonable, but for what it is, you know, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be too fussed about paying €8 for a big 15% peated ale. So yeah, kind of straddling the borders between whiskey and beer here. But there you can see the little Õllenaut man chilling on the bottle cap there, which is pretty cool. And you'll find this on all of the bottles. This, of course, is what makes Õllenaut quite distinct. But yeah, looks very, very nice. Very nicely presented, this one. As we said, 15% Imperial Peated Ale, this one. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very, very curious about this. So yeah, quite cool to be able to review this as a Scot. So let's get it out and into the glass. I wonder why, you know, smoked beers are so popular in Estonia. But then again, I say that, but in Finland, of course, you have the satis, and I think the Estonians have an equivalent of sati as well. So for those of you who don't know, the Finns, the satis are like these sort of junipery, farmhousey, smoky type beers that the Finns like, and I'm sure the Estonians have something as well, but they call it something slightly different. I can't remember what it is, but you know, the Estonian and Finnish languages are related. They're about 30% similar. And the rest of it's different, but both crazy because they're Uric languages, so their grammar is just insane. But yeah, they've got something similar to that, so that would kind of make sense actually. And of course, the sati and the Estonian satis, whatever they're called, are related to Gotlandsdrike as well, here in Sweden. So yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense as to why they would like a sort of Scotch smoky peated ale. And of course, Scotch whisky is popular all across the world these days. So yeah, as you can see with this beer, this looks absolutely lovely. It's poured a very deep kind of ruby colour. If I shine the light through this, yeah, it's like a very dark amber, but at the same time it's got a little bit of a kind of rubyish red hue to it, which is kind of interesting. You can see that it's poured with virtually no head. There's just a couple of sort of fawny coloured bubbles around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the edge of the glass there, and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head. But I mean, overall, it looks pretty nice, this one, I have to say. It's got a little bit of a natural kind of haze to it, but yeah, pretty clear actually, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, so this usually determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of the wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer, and any adjuncts or barrel aging will of course affect that as well. So barrel aging will affect the colour of the beer when it's something a little bit more kind of mahogany coloured. Like this, it would affect IPAs and things like that, but it's not often that you barrel age IPAs. But yeah, the adjuncts, any adjuncts as well, adjunct and barrel aging really affects the colour more of sour beers rather than anything else. You know, the Flanders Reds and things like this, and the modern keto sours as well. But yeah, in terms of colour of this one, as we say, a nice sort of mahogany, ruby, deep amber kind of colour. I do like how this beer goes about its business in. I do like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. It looks very, very nice. So yeah. Yeah, just surprised at how red it is, to be honest with you. But remember, the main difference between the German, the Bamberg Rauch malts, for example, is that they're more meaty, whereas the Scottish peated malts, if you like, tend to be a little bit more earthy and a wee bit more grassy, at least in my experience. But yeah, let's take a look at the aroma of this beer then and just see how we get on. Very excited for this, as I've repeated a few times. Let's go for it. That smells beautiful. It really does. Now, I will say straight away, peated whiskies and malts and stuff like this, and smoked beers as well, Rauch beers, these are definitely acquired tastes. Scotch whisky barrel aging as well, quite often they give, you know, quite smoky elements. You have to be very careful when you're aging beer in Scotch whisky barrels, because they're just, the pungency that you get from the Scotch whisky can be very, very overpowering, and that's one of the things. So I can imagine if you barrel aged this, it would just be, you know, it would just absolutely saturate your palate with smoke. If you aged this in like Lafroig casks or something like this, you know, that would I can imagine what this beer is going to taste like a little bit, but I can imagine if you barrel aged this, it would just be, you know, overload a little bit. But I will say the aroma of this beer, if you're a peat smoke head like me, this is absolutely beautiful. It's quite straight shooting though, in a sense. So yeah. It's what we would expect. So the backbone of this beer is unmistakably sort of smooth and woody. You get a lot of that in this one. So yeah, definitely a nice kind of smooth, woody element to this beer, which I really like. Yeah, lovely big kind of smooth, woody elements to the beer underneath. You can get a little tiny hint of a nuttiness out of this one, but that's kind of quite minimal. You do get an element of leathery kind of quality out of this one as well, and leathery is a term that we'd normally use to describe whiskey. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, woody, leathery, little touch nutty, and of course you've got these big smoky characters out of it. You know, when I smell this one, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of Bamberg Rauch malt in it, because you do actually get a little bit of the more meaty smokiness in this one, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the aroma that comes out of this is just it is just lovely. You do get, as I say, there's a good balance of smoky character in this one. You do get that more earthy and slightly grassy Scottish peat malt, but at the same time, the more you smell of it and the more your nose gets used to this, it starts to become a little bit more sort of meaty and sweet, like the Bamberg Rauch malts. So there is I think there is a little bit of brown sugar in this beer as well. I do get little hints of, like, you know, caramel and a slightly toasted brown sugar in there, potentially some kind of biscuity notes as well. So I really like how all of that goes together. But yeah, the malty side of this beer, I think, goes together very, very nicely in this one. It's got everything you'd expect. It really is just a big malty kind of monster, this beer. So yeah, earthy, earthy kind of grassy peated smoked malts in there. You get a little bit of that more meaty, kind of porky Bamberg Rauch malt, I think, as well. Although I'm not 100% convinced that that's in there. I think there might be a little bit of it, but just a very small hint to give the beer a little bit of depth, perhaps, a little bit more depth. But underneath that, as I say, the backbone of this beer is distinctly woody, leathery, little touch nutty, and there's wee elements of brown sugar in there, there is a bit of a sweet caramel to it, but it's quite a toast. There is quite a bit of toasty brown sugar in there, and a wee hint of a biscuity note. But malty backbone to this beer is absolutely lovely. On the hoppy side of things, then, there is a little bit of hoppy character to this one, but not overly much. I mean, you get a little bit of, you certainly get a little bit of earthiness out of this one, which you would expect, but it's quite a smooth earthiness. There's a wee hint of a floral aromaticity in there as well. You can certainly smell that, and a little touch of a kind of grassy. There's certainly a little bit of a kind of grassy, citrusy note out of this one, just a little bit. So yeah, the green component from the hops is definitely there, but it certainly takes a back seat to other things. But let's have a look at fruity parts of the beer. So yeah, I think there is a wee touch of fruitiness to this one. You can smell there's like a teeny little bit of a kind of raisiny note to it, a wee touch of fig and things like that. And there is just a little hint of a kind of blackcurrant, as I say, a little bit of blackcurrant, a little bit of fig, and maybe a wee tiny hint of raisin. But those are very, very, very subtle. I would, I wish to be very, very clear about that. The fruity side of this beer is very, very subtle. This one is all about the malts. But like I said, this one smells absolutely beautiful. I want to have a taste of it now and see how we get on. So yeah, this one is the Imperial Turbahunt, a 15% Imperial Peated Ale from Pruulikoda Õllenaut in Saue to the southwest of Tallinn in Estonia. This is a beer that I've been wanting to try for quite a wee while since I've had it. So let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and as the Estonians would say, terviseks. Let's go for it. Ooh. That's very nice. I'm going to say straight away, I like this beer, but I'm not 100% sure what style it is. Yeah. They say it's just an Imperial Peated Ale. So it actually, on first impression, it actually comes across in a lot of ways like, a Rauch Bock, like a smoked Doppelbock. It's actually very much like that. It doesn't, of course, the lager ale thing, Doppelbocks are lager beers, of course, so they are bottom fermenting yeast, cold temperature fermentations, 8 to 12 degrees. The ales, top fermenting yeast, 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. So yeah, you've got that in there. But this one really, just on first impressions, it really feels like a Rauch Bock. That's the first impression I have of this one. But they say, it is an ale. It is an ale. We need to remember that. And perhaps I have this one just slightly too cold, but the fridge was, I think I usually keep my fridge at like 7-8 degrees. So yeah, maybe you want to drink this one just a little bit warmer than that, and I'm sure this beer will open up a little bit more the more that you drink of it, in a sense. But yeah, it's certainly got that nice big warming quality to it down here as well, which is what you'd expect from something with 15%. But this is a beautiful beer. This big thumbs up to Õllenaut for this. The Scotsman approves, absolutely. And the other thing we can say about this beer, this is one of these ones that is most definitely an acquired taste. This isn't a beer that I would really recommend for people that don't like smoky characters. I know that there's some people that can't stand it, but I love it. I absolutely love these kind of smoke. I love smoked meat. I love smoked whiskey, and the Rauch beers. When I found those, that was it. That was my route into craft beer, which is quite an unusual way to get into it. But this one is, right up my street. If you like, the Bamberg beers like Spezial and Schlenkerla, Weyerer, of course, as well, have a very good Rauch beer. If you like these sort of things, you will enjoy this. And if you enjoy the likes of, Lafroig and the the Isla whiskies and stuff like this, you will certainly enjoy this. But let's try and break it down for you and explain it a little bit more. It's actually quite similar. The flavour of this beer is quite similar to what you pick up from the aroma. It's one of these ones that translates from aroma to flavour pretty well. So, backbone of this beer then. As I was saying, this beer, it's sort of got like a kind of slightly dry, woody quality. That's what blankets the kind of middle of your tongue. It does have a little bit, it's almost, you know, I say beechwood, that's the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about beer and smoke. You know, the Bamberg Rauch malts from Weirmann, usually, they are smoked using beechwood. So the backbone of this beer is almost a little bit more kind of beechwoody. You can kind of feel that sort of dry, woody quality. That is what blankets the middle of your palate. What you'll notice as well is if that you focus on that middle third of your tongue, you can feel that you get this sort of leathery character definitely developing on top of that. So there's a mix of woody and leathery notes there. And as you move towards the front half of that middle third of your tongue, you get a little bit of a kind of nutty character coming out of the beer. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one for sure. It certainly works. It works out very, very nicely. So yeah, the backbone of this one is, you know, quite straight shooting. It's smooth, slightly dry wood, bit of leather on top of that, and then a wee bit of a nutty character in the front half of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, you do get an element of kind of brown sugar in there. You can feel a wee bit, if you go to the dead centre of your palate, you can feel like a slightly sweet caramel there, and as you move out from the centre of your palate, you know, it does become a little bit more of a kind of toasty brown sugar, and then there's a wee bit more of a kind of you do get a little touch of a slightly biscuity, you know, McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing in there, but the brown sugars are not overly prominent in the beer, I would say, but the smoky character is quite interesting too, because what I would say is that at the back of that middle third of your palate, that's when you get the more earthy, grassy, sort of peaty kind of things. That's when you get the more kind of scotchy element out of it. But as you move further forward, and this is a general trend with your palate, the back of your palate tends to pick up more bitter things, and the front of your palate, you know, tends to pick up the sweeter side of things. So as you move forward on that middle third of your palate, you have a lovely more meaty type note out of this, and that, as I say, that makes me wonder if there is potentially a little bit of, you know, Weirmann Rauch malt from Bamberg in this, because it does have a little bit of that Schlenkerla type quality. But yeah, earthy, grassy sort of peaty notes, and the back half of that middle third of your palate. And as you move further forward, it smoothens out a little bit, and then you get a wee bit of the more meaty type notes out of the beer. So yeah, this is interesting. And I think the thing is, the brown sugars kind of push through the smoky character a bit. The smoky character sits on the peaty smoky character sits on top of the wood at either end, and then you've just got an oval in the middle of it, and that's where you start to get some of the brown sugary notes. And of course, that is the boozy part of the beer. So yeah, stylistically, as I say, this one, you know, it could be like some kind of, you could compare it to like some kind of old ale, or you could potentially say it's like a Rauch Bock in some ways. It is. Rauch Bock is the first one that came to mind when we're comparing this to other styles and, you know, trying to categorise it. But you shouldn't categorise beer all that much. The question should be whether it's a nice beer or not, and this one certainly is, at least for me. I'm a big sort of peat head, I guess we could say. So yeah. But they've pulled this one off very nicely. In a lot of ways, it's quite a straight shooting beer, but it gives you everything you would want. So yeah, I like that about this beer for sure. But that's the middle third of your palate. We've described that quite well. Let's move on to the other sides of the thing then. So what you will notice with this beer is that you do get a little touch of breadiness comes out of it the further into the aftertaste, and it's almost like a kind of rye bread. It's like a sort of German rye bread. I do miss the German rye bread when I lived there. But yeah, on that border region between between middle third and back third of your palate, you feel a little bit of a bready build up there, a wee bit of a kind of grainy bread crusty thing. Then as you go into the back third of the palate, You can feel there's a wee bit of, the woodiness gets a little bit drier. There's a little bit of toastiness in there too, and some toasty grains. On top of that, there's a little bit of a smoother bready note. Then away above that, you have a little bit more of you can feel a little bit more of a kind of airy, yeasty quality there. So on the back third of your palate, you do get a little bit more sort of bready. You do get a little bit more kind of bready and airy, yeasty kind of quality in there. So I like how that goes together in this beer. You do get a little bit of breadiness out of it in the back third of your palate. So when you start at the back of your palate, you can feel as you come further forward, the flavour's a little bit taller at the back. It condenses down and then it's quite squashed together in that middle third of the tongue. So yeah, I really like how I do really like how that pieces together in this one. So a big thumbs up to Õllenaut for this. I like how it goes about its business. That's for sure. And that's the middle. That's the malty and yeasty part of the beer covered, I think, in this one. Let's focus on the hoppy part then. So back corners of the palate, there's definitely a nice wee bit of earthiness in there, and it's quite a smooth earthiness as well. As you move further forward, it does get a little touch herbal, and that earthy herbal kind of quality spreads quite far forward. But as you reach the front corners of the tongue, it's definitely more sort of floral, and it's definitely more kind of floral and aromatic in a sense, and I really like how that goes together in this one. As I say, lovely big floral aromatic notes on the front corners of the palate there. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's distinctly lighter. And grassier. So yeah, there's a wee touch of citrusy zestiness to the grassy note in this beer, but you know, it's quite straightforward. The green component in this beer is actually very, very nice. But yeah, the hops do take a bit of a backseat to everything else, of course. This is most definitely a more malt forward type beer, but this beer does give you a little bit of a green component, and I think you would want that in something like this just to give it a little bit more depth. Obviously, the other thing to consider is that the longer you let this beer sit, the more the hoppy characters are going to drop out of it, of course. And I've had this one since not far off a year, actually. I think it was August last year that I went to Estonia, so I've had this one sitting for quite a while. Just bear that in mind, and I'm not sure exactly when it was produced, but yeah. Front third of your palate then, let's focus on the kind of fruity side of things. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, a few kind of bread crusty elements. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit kind of smoother, and again you get a wee bit, you know, it's that sort of smooth, slightly dry woody thing, and on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the hops. And the fruity side of this beer is a little bit interesting. So yeah, it's actually got quite a lot of a kind of dried fruity character to it. And the fruit, this is the one place I would say the beer is different from the aroma. The fruit that you pick up in the flavour of this one is quite different from what you get in the aroma, to be honest, because you do get a little bit of a red fruity character from the aroma. But for me, the fruity note in this one is quite dried, you know. So I get a lot of like sultanas out of this one, and by sultanas I mean, you know, dried white green grapes. You know, this is the kind of thing that I get out of this beer. You know, there's maybe a wee hint of like a peary apple-y kind of thing to this as well, which is interesting. And maybe, you know, maybe there's just a tiny little hint of a slightly figgy-ish note, like there's a wee tiny little hint of a red fruity character to this one. But as I said, in the aroma, it had a little bit of raisin, it had a little bit of like a figgy, black curranty sort of thing. So that was really interesting with this beer, that's for sure. Yeah, the fruity part in this beer, I have to say, is the fruity side of this beer I thought was really, really interesting. But yeah, I like how I do like how this one pieces together in that sense. So yeah, as I say, sultana type qualities in there, and I think underneath you can feel the sort of dryness of the wood coming through with this beer. On that front third of your palate, it gets drier and drier the further you go into the aftertaste. A little bit of a sultana type note, as I say, a little bit of pear, and maybe just a tiny little hint of a kind of you know, just a little touch of a figgy note there. But yeah, dried fruits, pear, and yeah, sultanas. I think I would go with that. So yeah, I think that covers the fruity side of this beer. Actually, this beer gets drier and drier the further that you go into the aftertaste, and I think it gets drier the more that it kind of warms up as well. We've obviously sat talking about this beer for about 10-15 minutes and things like that, so yeah, it does start to dry up a little bit, and I think that suits the flavour of the beer as well. You get more of the woodiness kind of lingering there into the aftertaste, and the smokiness just kind of sits on top of that, the peaty qualities. But yeah, this is a lovely beer. I really have enjoyed this one, and I tell you something, for a 15%er, it actually drinks fairly easily, to be honest, but maybe it's just because I'm used to the whiskey. But yeah, I think on that note, we've covered the flavour. Let's just finish off with the mouthfeel then. So for me, this beer, like I say, it's not the heaviest thing you're going to come across in the world. I actually find this sits at the kind of top end of mid-bodied. It's actually very similar, as I say, to, like, if you think about the sort of mouthfeel you would get from a Doppelbock, a Rauchbock, as I say, this beer really makes me, if I was to taste this blind, I would guess that it was a Rauchbock. So yeah, I would say, yeah, it's actually got, you know, it's quite mid-bodied, carbonation is very smooth, and it's actually got a good degree of slickness to it. It's got a little bit of an oily slickness to it for sure, and it feels quite clean at the same time. And you quite often get this with Nordic beers, and I guess Estonia, you could kind of, it's debatable whether you can include them in the Nordic sort of thing. But yeah, you always notice this with some of the Estonian beers as well, is that they feel quite clean, similar in a similar way to the Nordic beers. But yeah, the malty backbone of this beer is very, very smooth. It gets a little bit drier, as I say, the further you go into the aftertaste. There's a wee bit of, you know, sweetness to it as well, but those peaty, the sort of peaty, earthy, grassy kind of notes come out of it beautifully. They really linger into the aftertaste as well, and there's just a little bit of the meatiness. I think, you know, when you first take this beer in, that's when you get the more meaty elements out of the smokiness, but then the further you go with it, it's the earthy grassiness from the Scottish peat malts that really shines through. But yeah, big woodiness to it. It's very, very smooth, this. A little bit of hoppy character. It tells you on the bottle here that it's 40 IBUs. I probably would have thought it was a bit less than that, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's straight in front of me there, so it tells you it's 40 IBUs, but I don't think I could have guessed that. Remember, my IBU counts are my weakest point of beer reviewing. So yeah, and then it's just got a little bit of a kind of oily, slick, fruity character to it as well. But this one is a beer that I've very, very much enjoyed. A very, very quirky beer, but that's why I wanted to get one and review it for you here on the channel. So yeah, I think we can round off the review there then. Really very much like a kind of strong Rauchbock, this beer, rather than anything else. So if you like the Schlenker La Eiche, I think you will enjoy this beer. And this is just like a kind of Scottish version of that, so a more grassy, earthy kind of smoked character rather than that sweeter, meaty note that you get from the Bamberg Rauchmalts. There is a little bit of that German smoke character in here, so I suspect there might be a little touch of Bamberg Rauchmalt to it, but yeah, mainly a kind of more grassy, earthy, Scottish peaty malt to it. But yeah, I like how this, I do like how this goes together, so big thumbs up to Õllenaut for this one. So I guess we can leave it there for this review. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. This has been an awesome beer to review, so big thumbs up to Pruulikoda Õllenaut, the Imperial Turbahunt. I'm going to say, you can say that, I thought I was going to forget the name of the beer there, but the Imperial Turbahunt, these guys really know what they're doing at the malty end of the spectrum, so Õllenaut are one of the Estonian breweries that you really should check out. I can feel the alcohol going to my head, as I said earlier, you get a bit of alcohol warmth out of this, but yeah, this is a lovely, lovely beer, especially if you're a big fan of those big smoked peaty Scotch whisky, so big thumbs up to them. But check out my social media, check out Õllenaut's social media, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below, let me know what your favourite beers are from Õllenaut, because I do need to get a few more from these guys. But thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. This one was the Imperial Turbahunt, a 15% Imperial Peated Ale from Pruulikoda Õllenaut in Saue to the southwest of Tallinn in Estonia. Slange, skull, cheers, tervisex, and thanks for watching.